حي على الفلاح.
Ta, Sin, Mim. These are the verses of the Manifest book. We narrate to you the story of Musa and Firaun for the people who believe. The famine in the land of Canaan became unbearable for the family of Yaqub. Because of this famine, Yaqub traveled with his family to Egypt to both live in better conditions and be with his son Yusuf. Yusuf's wisdom had impressed the Pharaoh of Egypt to the point that he was appointed viceroy of Egypt, which was second in power only to the Pharaoh. The next 400 years in Egypt saw the Israelites prosper and rapidly multiply to about 3 million people. They held important positions and played an important role in the political, cultural, and economic life of the country. It is not surprising that they stirred the jealousy of the native Egyptians who felt outshone by the foreigners. The Pharaoh became nervous that the Israelites would increase further in number and end up seizing power. In time, the Copts of Egypt felt they had enough. Led by their Pharaoh, they started tormenting and mistreating the Israelites. For the oppressed minority, life in Egypt quickly became unbearable. They had now entirely lost their social and political rights. They wished to return to Yaqub alayhi salam's homeland, Canaan. Nevertheless, the Pharaoh would not let them go. That is because he made the Israelites work in hard labor, such as in the building of the pyramids. They had to build cities, erect monuments, construct roads, work in the quarries, and hew stones, or make bricks and tiles. The Pharaoh kept them under close surveillance and made them work in tough conditions. Even those unable to work were forced to pay high taxes on a daily basis. The Israelites, or the Bani Israel, were 12 tribes, each a descendant of one of Yaqub alayhi salam's sons. These sons were Rubel, Shamun, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zabulun, Dan, Naphtali, Jed, Ashir, Binyamin, and Yusuf. According to Ibn Kathir, the Bani Israel talked vaguely about one of their nation's sons arising to wrest the throne of Egypt from Pharaoh. Perhaps it was just a persistent daydream from an oppressed people, or even an ancient prophecy, but the story of Musa begins here. Allah says, "The Pharaoh certainly boasted in the land and divided its people into factions, oppressing a group among them. He was truly a corrupter." Firaun, the ruler of Egypt, was one of the mightiest rulers in history, and his civilization was so technologically advanced that we are still unable to understand or even replicate much of it today. However, he was also the most tyrannical and oppressive leader in history. Power made him exceedingly arrogant, and he expressed himself to be the Lord of creation. Together with his ministers, Qarun and Haman ruled the land with an iron fist. Pharaoh and his trusted ministers directed matters as if lives of the population were of little or no consequence. He used the strategy of divide and conquer. He set up class distinctions, divided the people into groups and tribes, and set them against one another. The Bani Israel were put at the lowest level of Egyptian society. They were the slaves and servants. Musa alayhi salam's family was from amongst the children of Israel. The reason which led Firaun to behave brutally with them was that the Bani Israel used to believe that there would be a child from the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam, at whose hands will be the destruction of the Pharaoh. This was due to, and Allah knows best, the incident that occurred with Sarah, the wife of Ibrahim, when the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh of the time, tried to take advantage of her. However, Allah saved her and also gave her glad tidings concerning this child and what he will do. Thus, this glad tiding was famous among the Israelites. The people of Egypt used to talk about it, so much so that some of the ministers informed Pharaoh, and so Firaun knew about this. The people of Egypt were influenced by dreams and the interpretation of dreams. Dreams featured prominently in the story of Prophet Yusuf, and once again in the story of Musa. The fate of Bani Israel is affected by a dream. One night, the Pharaoh saw a dream where a fire came from the direction of Jerusalem, and it burnt all the Coptic people and their dwellings, but did not harm the Israelites. When he woke up, he gathered all the priests, soothsayers, and sorcerers, and asked them the interpretation of this dream. They said, "A boy from these people will be born, at whose hands will be the destruction of the Egyptian people." True to character, Pharaoh reacts arrogantly and gives the order that all male children born to Bani Israel be slain. His ministers, however, perceive that this would lead to the complete annihilation of Bani Israel and economic ruin for Egypt. No woman delivered a baby boy without the wide network of the Pharaoh's army knowing about it. If any woman gives birth to a male child, he is immediately put to death. The routine slaying of the male population proved to be unsustainable, and before long, it adversely impacted the economic and social structure of Egypt. There was a shortage of manpower, and the rest of the Egyptian society refused to perform the lowly tasks which were customarily assigned to the men of Bani Israel. Hence, at the advice of his ministers, Pharaoh ordered what he thought was a feasible solution, that the newborn males of Bani Israel were only to be put to death on alternate years to facilitate a controlled increase in the population of the male workforce. During one of the years of pardon in which boys were permitted to live, Qarun, the older brother of Musa, was born. However, Musa was born on the year that the male infants were to be slain. Therefore, according to all the law of the land, Musa should have been slain. However, Musa's life demonstrates the journey of faith in Allah and the power of predestination above all human planning. Allah says, "And we wish to do a favor to those who were weak and oppressed in the land, and to make them rulers, and to make them the inheritors, and to establish them in the land. And we let Pharaoh and Haman and their hosts receive from them that which they feared." The scene is set, and Musa is born. It is said that the signs of pregnancy did not even show on Musa's mother. Hence, with all the soldiers on the lookout for pregnant women, she went completely unnoticed. The birth was discreet, but when he was born, she knew that if he was discovered, death was unavoidable. The situation was precarious. The smallest sound of the crying infant would bring the soldiers upon them. His parents' heart must have constricted with joy and fear simultaneously. What were they to do now? How would they conceal a newborn baby? How was a mother, still tender from the strain of childbirth and already under months of severe emotional pressure of the concealed pregnancy, to endure the horror? Musa's mother was a righteous woman, pious and God-fearing. Therefore, it was inspired to the mother of Musa to take a piece of wood and make it like a chest and tie it with a rope. Her house used to be on the bank of the Nile River, so she would feed him, and whenever she feared that someone may come, she would place him in that piece of wood and untie the rope and let it go in the river, keeping it under control by the other end of the rope. Then, when the person went away, she would pull it back to her. Allah says, "And we inspired to the mother of Musa, suckle him, but when you fear for him, cast him into the river, and do not fear and do not grieve. Indeed, we will return him to you, and we will make him one of the messengers." Now try to visualize yourself in the mother's shoes. She feared for his life, and the improbable solution to hurl him into the river would have run against any maternal instincts. What were the odds of his survival in its swirling waters? How can a river, which only flows in one direction, bring him back to her? Not a gentle stream, but the Nile River, a huge, powerful river with a strong current. How could she not feel ripped apart by the hopelessness of the situation? Musa's mother put her trust in Allah. Do not fear and do not grieve, for we will bring him back to you. She made a waterproof basket, placed her tiny son inside, and cast him into the river. Ibn Kathir narrates that as the basket touched the water, the raging current became calm and gentle, sweeping the basket silently downstream. Moses' sister was instructed by her mother to slip silently through the reeds and follow the basket on its journey. By Allah's command, the currents navigated the baby to safety and lodged the basket and its precious content by the river bank. Again, Allah's plan was in motion, and the basket was dispatched to the most unlikely place by the palace of the Pharaoh. Musa was cast into the river to escape certain death, and now his resting place is in the palace of the Pharaoh. This was surely too much for a mother to bear. However, events about to unfold will demonstrate that the promise of Allah is always true. Allah says, "And whosoever fears Allah and keeps his duty to him, he will make a way for him to get out from every difficulty, and he will provide him from sources he never could imagine. And whosoever puts his trust in Allah, then he will suffice him. Verily Allah will accomplish his purpose. Indeed, Allah has set a measure for all things." The basket was discovered by the slave close to the river bank, who, having no authority to open the basket, presented it to their queen. The queen was Asya bint Muzahim ibn Ubaid ibn al-Rayyan ibn al-Walid. Al-Rayyan was the pharaoh during the time of Yusuf alayhi salam. It is said that she was born from the Israelites, from the same clan as that of Musa. Another opinion says that she was his aunt, and Allah knows best. Asya, in contrast to her arrogant, proud husband, was a righteous, merciful woman. The moment Asya laid eyes on baby Musa, Allah placed in her heart a love of this little boy, a kind of love of goodness that can only originate from Allah. The royal couple were unable to conceive a child, and this tiny baby awakened her maternal instincts. Asya clutched him to her chest and said to Pharaoh, "A comfort to my eye and yours." Pharaoh replied, "He may be a comfort for you, but as for me, no." She said, "He may be of benefit to us, or we might take him as a son. When he grows up, he will help and protect us. Please spare this baby. He's a gift on our doorstep." She eventually convinced the Pharaoh. Allah set Musa up as a royal son of Egypt. He provided him with the strongest human support in the land. Asya and Pharaoh now had a son, who was now protected by the very person who had sought to slay him. Asya summoned wet nurses to the palace, but Musa refused to suckle. This was a cause of great distress. They tried all they could to somehow feed him, but he did not accept. Allah said, "And we had ordained that he would refuse to suck any foster mother." So they sent him with midwives and other women to the market in order to see if they can find someone to feed him. So while they were waiting there, amidst the onlookers, Musa's sister saw him. She did not give away that she was his sister. Rather, she said, "Should I show you a family who will look after him for you and be sincere?" When she said this, they asked her, "How do you know that they will be sincere to him?" She replied, "They want to please the Pharaoh and benefit him." Meanwhile, the heart of Musa's mother was void. She was distressed and worried about his fate. She would have reached breaking point and blurted the secret of his identity had Allah not placed steadfastness and faith in her heart. Allah relieved her of her torment when her daughter rushed into the house breathlessly, relating the story of what had happened to Musa. And Allah says, "So we returned him to his mother, that she might be content and not grieve, and that she would know that the promise of Allah is true, but most people do not know." And once reunited with his birth mother, Musa immediately started suckling, much to everyone's relief. According to Ibn Kathir, the household, including Pharaoh himself, was astonished. Pharaoh asked the woman who she was, and she replied, "I am a woman of sweet milk and sweet smell, and no child refuses me." Pharaoh accepted this answer. Asya was elated, not knowing the true identity of Musa's mother. She offered for her to live in her palace in order to continue suckling the child. But Musa's mother declined, explaining that she had a husband, children, and other obligations at home to attend to. So, a deal was struck where they mutually agreed for Musa to be dropped off at her home every day to suckle, and moreover, that she was to be given a grant to cover all her expenses. Again, what a strange turn of events, that the Pharaoh who had set out to slay him ended up paying for his upkeep and that of his family. And thus Musa was returned to the arms of his mother and raised in the palace as a prince of Egypt. In adopting Musa, the Pharaoh and his wife must have thought that by raising him as their own, he would be loyal to them. However, two factors play a major role in a person's upbringing: inherited traits, warasa, and education. Man comes under the influence of one or the other, or sometimes both. This was what the Quran subtly points to, where it says, the Pharaoh and his wife had no idea how things would turn out.